Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Here Be Dragons. I am your host, Steven. With me, as always, my trusty, rusty sidekicks, Nessie and John. How you guys doing this week?
Good. I'm back at home while you guys are out in the wilderness.
Coming to you live from the Forest Moon of Endor.
Yes.
So, big topic this week. Really kind of more high-minded concept, and I love when we do this type of thing. You know, examining specific pop culture stories is nice and all, but like talking about the why of the obsession is just as much fun, in my opinion.
Yes, and I just want to throw out a quick thank you to Pedar who suggested that for this week, and it was a brilliant idea because I love when we have these types of discussions that just allow us to kind of dig deep and when it's not targeted at just one thing. Yes, I shaved. Get over it, y'all. This stream is talking about fantasies that we enjoy, and the fantasy you all live in is that I'm going to have a beard every week.
Oh, I love that it's the thing that just keeps happening. So yeah, you know what? Let me start with this question. So the real, like, the title of the video or the live stream is "Why Do We Love It?" So let's start with when did you love it, and we'll go from there. John, when did you love science
because that's really what I wanted to dig into, because we can give like general ideas of like why does fantasy appeal to us, but like I definitely wanted to dig into the why of why we specifically are into this and what triggered that and so forth and so on. And I think a lot of people would think that for me it would be, hey, Lord of the Rings. John is always going on about Lord of the Rings. He's got a Lord of the Rings hat, and today I have a Lord of the Rings shirt.
Oh yeah, nice.
But
I have come to the nerd side. We have dragons and stuff.
I just am a dragon.
I mean, it's a standard dragon. Mwah.
But I didn't actually even read The Hobbit until I was in about halfway through high school. So my love of fantasy and sci-fi goes much further back, and I was looking at the different stuff that I was into when I was a kid to kind of refresh my memory a bit. And I realized it's no wonder I love animation so much, because all the stuff was rooted in early cartoons from my childhood. I mean, probably the early stuff was shows like Transformers and Thundercats.
Man, the first show I ever couldn't miss was called Star Blazers.
That's what I'm talking about.
And I was literally in first grade, and we would hustle home from school so that we wouldn't miss Star Blazers.
You just prayed the bus wasn't late that day.
Well, we walked home because it was only a few blocks, and it was the early '80s,
Yeah,
but that was my show. And I think the next one might have been Robotech. I don't know who out there knows Robotech, but I love it.
I don't remember if I ever watched it, but I certainly know of it.
I mean, Voltron, Defenders of the Universe.
Right. I didn't get into Voltron, but like, even as a young child, I could smell children's writing and didn't love it. Not writing that's made for like 12-year-olds, but even when I was 6, I didn't like writing for 6-year-olds. I liked writing for 12-year-olds. And that's probably always been the case, that my tastes have been ahead of my actual age, at least in that department. Is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles sci-fi or fantasy? I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
if you want to talk, we're going to talk about the themes of sci-fi and fantasy and how they're the same and how they're different at some point in this conversation. I think I would qualify it, just my gut reaction, as sci-fi.
Yeah, but I think the net is, we can cast it a bit wide. It's got like, I mean, the how of it all is sci-fi, but at its essence, it very much feels like a fantasy. Like you've got,
It's got elements of both, for sure.
Yeah, you got giant turtles who know martial arts going around kicking butt, and that's very fantasy. I had made a bit of a list of some of those early shows I was into, because I even jotted down G.I. Joe here because honestly, there was
fantasy tech.
Yeah. And like there was some, especially once you got into like the animated movie, there was a lot of fantasy in that. So
yeah, I was never that big into G.I. Joe, but like I don't remember an age I wasn't a Star Wars fan. Because I grew, and I was the first. I was about as young as you can be, and grow up fully in the time of Star Wars. Like I was born in 1974 at the tail end, almost 1975. So I was 2.5 years old when Star Wars came out. We were living in Germany at the time, and it wasn't until over a year later that we moved back to the States, and it was still in the theater, and we went to see it. And the first movie I have actual memories of seeing, is The Empire Strikes Back, which is my favorite movie to this day. And okay, so it's been my whole freaking life. I have been, because Star Wars is that kind of beautiful blend of the two.
Yeah.
It is sci-fi and fantasy.
Well, I have a vantage point just being a little bit older than Steven, so I saw Star Wars. That was I remember seeing it in the theaters, and just that it was so different. And so definitely I am a child of the Star Wars generation. But even being a bit older, I was born in the summer of 1969. The year I was born
the summer of love.
Like the summer of love, the age of Aquarius. Fantasy was booming. Science fiction was in what I would call like its golden age. Everything and anything was possible. Mankind had reached for the stars. We had landed on the moon. It was unlimited possibilities. And that's the era that I was born into. And I think the science fiction and fantasy that comes out of that age is some of the hallmark benchmarks of the classic genre.
You know what came out in the 60s? Star Trek and 2001.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Frank Berger was very busily writing Dune.
I will say, like, I really am envious of people who got to experience 2001, like when it came out, because the nearest I have been able to experience it was when it came out a couple of years ago in IMAX theaters, and I went to go see it, and I said, all right, put yourself in like the mindset of, being in the late 1960s, and like space exploration, is a thing, but we haven't like gone there yet. And people are seeing this, and it's like, it's like a trip into space. And when I tried to watch it through that lens on such a big screen, it was just an experience unlike anything I could imagine. So I can only imagine actually, seeing it at that time with, with sort of where our knowledge of outer space was at that point. And it just must have been absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah. Kubrick said, I've said it before, Kubrick's a genius, but I sure wouldn't want to work with him. Lady Starfall has an interesting question. Do you think Lovecraft was instrumental more than others in science fiction? I'm gonna. My gut says no, but knowing how he's touched the genre in a way that his name, Lovecraftian, means something now, and there are often elements of that in science fiction. There's a lot of it's more horror than science fiction, in my opinion. But
It
like,
is.
look at The Expanse. It had an
Right.
existential, extra dimensional, unknowable threat.
And
So
that's kind of like a theme with sci-fi, is mankind's both desire to achieve and to reach the stars, to go out there, but also the fear of what might be there. It's it's that ambivalence, that adrenaline creating uh, quest, energy, um, drive, ambition, whatever that pushes our species forward. Is we're afraid, but yet we want to know. So it kind of like distills all of that um, desire that we as human beings have to know the unknown.
yeah, he's had a huge impact for sure. I'm not sure more than others. Isaac Asimov, Carl Sagan, um, like I would say that Frank Herbert has had a bigger effect on modern science fiction than Lovecraft has. Um,
And I do want
I
to
just want
pipe
to.
in.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I just wanted to point out somebody agrees with me, so
I
that's
mean,
good.
there has to be one.
Right, and thank God it's another white dude. Anyway, disclaimer: we love everyone here. Come on, it's a joke at my own expense.
I do want to say, because people have been commenting on it. Strangely enough, I don't think I was much of a Star Wars kid when I was really young. I know I had them recorded on VHS because when I did get into Star Wars, I dug those out. So I think when I was like really little, I had seen the movies and probably went through a quick period of, being into it, but it wasn't something that made a lasting impact. It really wasn't until um, 97 and they were advertising the special editions. That's very much when I came of age as a Star Wars fanatic.
Mhm.
John,
Um,
you were born kind of in the valley.
Yeah.
No.
Because I do remember seeing advertisements for Return of the Jedi on HBO.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I must have been really young when I was seeing those. But yeah, it's not like those weren't I wasn't like majorly into it. At least I have no memory of being super into it. But once the special editions were coming out, that was definitely like I started going nuts. And I will never ever forgive myself for having the stupidity of a kid. And when I heard that they were coming back out, digging out those crappy old VHS tapes and watching them immediately instead of waiting to see them for the first time on the big screen. But I had no concept of the value I would place on that, and I will never ever have that chance again. So
yeah, people are mentioning a lot of really great science fiction in the. I guess we're kind of on the sci-fi part of it. Just that's how our conversation wandered. But in point of fact, to me, Star Wars is more fantasy than sci-fi. It's generally
it kind of blends the other way. It's
right.
more
It definitely has a
fancy.
lot of trappings of science fiction. It's got spaceships, and it's got high-tech weapons and computers and all that stuff. But there's magical, lucky, super lucky space wizards, and there's these big monstrous creatures of every kind of description, and there's plots between good and evil, and there's the hero's journey at the middle of it all in some form. Star Wars does a lot of heroes' journeys over and over and over again. And that's fine. That's what that particular franchise is really good at.
Yeah, no, I've always said fantasy, Star Wars is a fantasy in sci-fi trappings.
Right.
And that's what it is. And it's like, it's no wonder I love it so much, because as you were saying, Stephen, it is, the classic hero's journey. And, you've got, the Jedi are wizards, and you've got laser swords, and, it's just, I do want to address like the why of it.
Right. I was literally just thinking, but why?
A big part of why I love fantasy in particular so much is that classic hero's journey of, we get to live vicariously through these people who get whisked away on, on a magical quest, essentially. And that's why, like, if this was a different kind of stream, I'd be going on about the, the virtues of this genre in terms of how it relates to society. It does tell us something. No, this is about why we love fantasy and sci-fi. And the reason why I love it is because pure escapism. I love being taken away, on a journey into a life and a world that I'm never going to have the chance to experience myself. And we get to live vicariously through these characters, whether that's, Luke Skywalker or Frodo Baggins or Harry Potter. Who doesn't want a big giant, big giant guy to come knocking through the door and saying, you're a wizard, come with me, you're going to learn all kinds of cool stuff. It gives us a chance to let loose and explore those parts of the imagination. And
right.
Yeah, and that's why I've always loved it more than, if you give me a story that's set in modern times, it's just about something that, I can expect to hear about on the news or something like that. I'm like,
I mean, it can be a compelling story, but
it still can be, but it's not going to be my favorite type of story. It's not going to be the kind of thing that really captures my imagination. And fantasy and sci-fi does that absolutely.
Okay, Nessie, do you want to try to follow that up?
John Suck. Well, escapism is one thing, and finding, like, seeing different types of people. Like, if you're kind of a different kid, you're not exactly, you're a nerd. Okay, nerds live different lives than a lot of people, because a lot of times we're alone. It's hard for us to find others like us, and seeing people, quote, like us, or like we would like to be on the big screen or even on the small screen, kind of helps us feel like we're not so alone in the world. If people are out there either making these characters or creating these cartoons or movies, they're like us, and it kind of, you just, like I said, you just don't feel so alone. So yeah, that it was a big comfort and companionship to me when I was growing up, to know that there were other people out there like me, even though they didn't exist in my small town.
Right. Okay. You said something that touched a note in me, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. Something about how you see someone and they can tell you something. You think about, oh, that's. Can't remember exactly what you said, but you're seeing the decisions you might have made reflected in a character.
Yes. Yes.
So forgive me for being complicated about this, but I have a complicated neurological mess between my ears. I really had no idea who I was as a child. No clue. I had real difficulty with my identity as a person. Sorry, excuse me. I was always hyper emotional, and a skinny kid, and awkward socially, and middle child. Parents divorced when I was 6 years old, so I had a lot of difficulty knowing who I was. Stories like this let me go. Not I want to be him, but if I was him, that's what I would do. It helped me define my morality to watch heroes being heroes. It helped me. It helped define. Because I've always valued restraint, and I love a hero that shows restraint. I've said it many times. Luke Skywalker, that's my guy. It's always going to be my guy. There will never be a greater hero in all of storytelling than Luke Skywalker, in this one person's humble opinion. It's going to be different for everyone, of course, but he's perfect. He's flawed, but those flaws are what he fights against, and that's part of that. That's part of that hero's journey. One of the things that we love about the hero's journey in general is that, you can draw the circle with the stages and like passing through the underworld and all that, but the way that is visualized in a particular hero's story tells you so much about the society that is creating that story. The challenges that the hero has to face and overcome tell you something about the culture that delivered that story. And the same is also true for science fiction, which I think is why they're often clumped together, because they let us imagine something different. Honestly, often reflecting the world we live in through the story of the hero's journey, or through the story of interacting with a fictional society and seeing how it's different from ours really is an exercise in examining ourselves. All right, discuss.
No, I really liked a lot of what you said, because I've been thinking about how a lot of the stuff that I watched did teach me about the kind of person that I wanted to be. And I was a very quiet, reserved child. That's another thing. These stories were, again, going back to escapism. They allowed me to, I think, get something that I wasn't getting in other places, because I was very uncomfortable in social situations, and so I've said for a really long time that I've felt like I'm more of a audience member to my own life instead of like a main character, which I used that example because when we all went to Ice and Fire Con, I said that changed because I felt completely different.
Right.
But the point being that these stories and these heroes and even villains, and it allowed me an outlet, not just for for my imagination, yes, but just for my sanity as well. And the people who populated those stories, as I was saying before, they taught me a great deal about the kind of person that I wanted to be. I'm not sure at what point Star Trek entered my life, but I'm sure that I watched episodes of the original series when I was very young, and then a few years later on, I was really big into the original films. And so those characters, just sort of taught me about, Star Trek is like especially the original series is presented as a sort of utopia, except for certain planets that they go to. But the idea is striving towards, something, an ideal. And similarly, an animated show that I was a great big fan of when I was a kid was X-Men, the animated series, which was all teaching me about the way society treats those who are different. And I'll say right now, I think I owe a lot of my moral compass to my parents. I'll give them
Right.
credit where credit is due. But I guarantee you the lessons taught me from that show, had a great impact on my life. And so, like, I feel like
Do you have
these
a favorite
one
character from that show?
what?
Do you have a favorite character from that show?
I'm going to actually betray myself a bit here and like name a character who's actually working against what I just said, because
No, that's all right. It's all right to love the problematic.
Because I always loved Magneto.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
And the reason for that was that he never
He made
realized
sense a little bit. He made
not necessarily that. It was the fact that he thought he was right. And that he had a firm belief in that, and he didn't see himself as the villain of the story. And I know there will be certain people who will argue, well, that's because he's not. I'm not, arguing or, either way on that. But I'm saying, like, even at a young age, I found the complexity of his character extremely interesting. And I think his character taught me that the world is complicated. And the fact that he and Charles Xavier were, as much as they were enemies, they were also best friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't sort of undersell or oversell. I can't say enough about how much that show taught me.
It's that thing that told you who you were on some level.
Yeah.
What about you, Nessie? Did something tell you who you were too? Were you an introverted child who?
I was extremely introverted. I was basically raised by my grandparents who were very religious. And my mom and my mother was there, but she worked shift work, so I was left in the care of my grandparents. And my family was very, very conservative, so I was kind of being told who I was before I could.
I'm familiar with that idea.
Figure out who I was. And I'm just gonna say, like, the two people that I had on my school lunchbox, because when you're a kid, you're taking your lunch, you got to have the cool lunchbox.
Mm-hmm.
My two were Wonder Woman and the Bionic Woman.
Okay.
Linda Carter, Lindsay Wagner were.
Yeah, neither one of them gonna kick your butt.
Yeah, they were like, my ideal when I was, say, 8 years old. It's like, oh, I want to grow up and be just like, Linda Carter. I want to be just like Lindsay Wagner. I want to beat up bad guys and stand up for myself. And that kind of thoughts allowed me to develop my own sense of what I thought was right and what I thought was wrong. And so that was good for me, being able to see things outside of the very conservative religious background that I grew up in and see other points of view. It's not all bad. The world is not evil, even though sometimes it is.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to let this hang here for a minute. Potter, I understand that this is a message telling us you understand how you feel, but far be it from you to ever miss a duck reference. Just saying.
Yeah. I mean,
we love you, buddy.
It was a near thing. We had even actually considered our retro review of Howard the Duck this weekend.
No. That's on the schedule like 7 years from now or something like that.
I have to call out Kate really quick here.
Oh,
Like Pan's Labyrinth is not a kids movie, so
it's not.
It is not. No, do not watch with a 5-year-old. Stephen and John, who was on your lunchbox when you were a kid? Who were you
Luke
sporting around
Skywalker.
in your
But
backpack?
you know what? But there was a time, Boba Fett, but like, and Darth Vader didn't. It just it was always Star Wars. It really was. Which thinking back, I'm surprised that I don't think of Star Wars differently almost because it was the original. Like, but the thing is, I grew up at a time when Star Wars was so popular. It wasn't nerdy to be a Star Wars fan. It was just culturally significant in that moment. It's the people that loved it 10 years later that they're like, come on, get over it. And we're like, no, this is my shit. So at that time, I didn't realize that was nerdy. You know what? And it's fantasy, but it's sci-fi. And I had seen some Star Trek, as a little one. But I want to say 1985, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. And
yes.
And Dungeons and Dragons taught me what an orc is, what a warg is. We had treants, which are basically ents. They just had to back off certain copyrighted words from Tolkien. They had to come to an understanding. Hobbits became halflings, but that's what taught me what a lot of the fantasy tropes, because that game was built to recreate tropes.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. So yeah, that was a huge influence for me too. And guess what? Still playing D&D to this very day. Played yesterday.
All day.
Also spent hours working on a map for D&D.
For your own fantasy creation, am I right?
Yep. And anyway, that leads me to an interesting point, because I do make my own fantasy stories. I play a lot of D&D. I play as a player sometimes. I also play as a dungeon master, which makes me feel, kind of like it takes me back to the feeling of sitting around a campfire and just telling stories. Because D&D is oral tradition largely. Most games don't get filmed, and you just have to remember the best you can. But it lets me recreate the greatest moments from stories that I love, with maybe a different skin on it. Or it also really helps me to explore ideas that I'm interested in that maybe I haven't seen anything else talk about. So I love it.
Yeah, it lets you, for a couple of hours out of a day, you can actually be that fantasy hero that you read about or you saw on the screen or you idealized. You can allow yourself to pretend, and it is escapism. Sometimes when I've had like a really bad week, there's nothing I like better than just dropping a big old fireball and blowing some shit up.
I'm being required by my mother to expound on being told who I was. Yeah, what mom that was doing that. To be clear, but there were people in my life who did want to tell me who I was or who they expected me to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mom is not one of them. That's all.
That is all.
Do you think Terminator is a sci-fi movie or a horror movie?
Yes. It can be both.
I think it's sci-fi because the central theme of it is a science fiction theme. It's scary.
But it's also the existential dread of the end or the future, if you will, or the more advanced taking over and destroying humanity. So that it does deal with some Lovecraftian themes that way. Just that, okay, so the final scene, the Terminators gone, but then you see that bright red eye. That red eye is just scary as hell to me for some reason. It's just like, oh, didn't get him. Humanity's living on the edge. We're on borrowed time all the time.
I will say I remember very specifically going to see Terminator 2 in cinemas because everybody was talking about, and I remember hearing my aunt and uncle talk about it to my parents in the car, and so I actually watched the first one in preparation for going to see it in theaters. But I guess I was only like 7 years old at the time. I do remember that when I saw it in theaters, I covered my eyes at the arm scene when he tears off the skin. It was a little too much for me at that young age, but and then of course all the really bad language completely went over my head. So much to the point where I remember one time around the house, I repeated Linda Hamilton's line at the end of the first Terminator, "You're terminated, mother bleeper," not knowing like what it meant or anything. And my mom was like, "Never say that, ever." So yeah,
because you had no conception. How old would you have been?
I guess like 7 years old.
7?
You were
Yeah.
What?
That's funny. That's funny. Like you weren't trying to be
I
was just reciting a movie line.
Right. Just
So
quoting into
innocent.
Hamilton.
So innocent. Speaking of science gone bad and or getting away from us, which kind of is also a theme among sci-fi. There's the entire. How many are we up to? Jurassic Park.
I mean, I'm all happy for people who enjoy those. I haven't seen the last several.
I mean, I'm a fan. I mean, I enjoyed the first.
Love what you love.
I enjoyed the first few.
Yours. Talk about dinosaurs.
Yeah, I too haven't seen the last, but what really kind of hooked me for that was I read a lot of Michael Crichton.
I read a lot of Crichton too, but
actually, it's funny because Jurassic Park was probably the first like grown-up book that I read. Like everything else at that age was, lower level reading. Like I'm trying to think how old. I guess I was 10 years old. Stuff were written for kids, but Jurassic Park, because it was a movie that I loved, so I picked up the book, and I think that was the first time I was exposed to like what a movie was like versus the original written work, and I remember thinking it was cool to see all the differences, and I just enjoyed reading it. I didn't fall in love with reading until Lord of the Rings, but Jurassic Park I think was kind of the start of like me stepping up my reading game a bit.
Yeah, that's when you started reading the big people books.
Yeah,
you stepped out of the juvenile section and crossed over into that other realm of the library, come into the wider world.
Yeah, no more Goosebump books for me. But no, I just wanted to really quick, because I'm sure we'll move on to some other stuff, some other things, if any of these ring a bell for anybody, because it's obvious that I was super into fantasy when I was a kid. The stuff I was watching was also He-Man and She-Ra, and I said Thundercats. I don't know if anybody remembers Silverhawks, which was which was like Thundercats in space. and then when I was a little bit older, as I said, X-Men the animated series, Gargoyles, which anybody who watched Gargoyles when it was on the air loved it, because it was like it had like medieval fantasy and also science fiction, because they show they're frozen in stone and then awakened in the
Hold
future.
on, hold on. Aaron agrees with you on
Of
something.
course.
Oh my God.
I don't know what to make of this moment.
This is disturbing. And then a big one, not animated, but when it came out and I was just the right age and it got me into martial arts, was of course Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which I was obsessed with.
I've probably told you this. I knew a guy that was on that show. I was a senior in high school when Power Rangers first came out, so
yeah, it just wasn't.
It was a miss for me, but like at the same time, I did watch the whole first season because somebody I knew was on that show.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
and of course that launched my first big crush, which
right
was of course Amy Jo Johnson, who played Kimberly,
the original Pink Ranger.
Yeah, but a lot of the stuff, the common thread, a lot of these things had like a really dense mythology behind them, and I think that also, in addition to the escapism of wanting to like go on some kind of a journey, there's also like I loved digging into deep backstories and learning stuff, which it's no shock that's why I ended up loving Lord of the Rings so much, because Tolkien was the expert at that, of having this vast deep mythology, you know, the whole Silmarillion is what that all is. And I've always loved that, which is why I love like reading really big books, because there's so much to dig into. And yeah, so
things that have like a deep lore, these are things that kind of seem like to stick with us. I mean, the big ones, it's the world building that goes into creating these fantasy or sci-fi worlds. The deeper the lore, the more world building is done, the more real it seems. The more we could just imagine ourselves being there and just being a part of the society, just stepping through the pages of the book or onto the screen and walking off into the sunset on our favorite planet, or flying off on a starship or a dragon, or entering like the world of fairy and living with the fairies for forever and ever.
You're talking about all this stuff, and I'm like, you know what, that'd be cool. You know what, those are cool. You know what, that's cool. And really, I think that's what it brings out of me. It's like, imagine the world you want, or some sci-fi is imagine the world you fear, and that's just as valid a story to tell.
Well, because that too is vicariously living through somebody like. That's the joy of the detachment of knowing that you're not in that world, because if it is a scary story, a circumstance that you wouldn't want to be in real life, but you still get to experience that. You get to dip your toes in and be like, this is what it would be like. And there's a thrill that comes with that.
There is.
But somebody else's thrill, because I don't know that I'd want to be the hero on that journey. But I mean, yeah, it's it just allows you to just transcend,
Yeah.
Sorry, I got lost in the chat.
Yeah, I was
for
just
a minute.
checking.
Like, there's some great conversation going on in the chat. Okay.
So when I was young, I was indoctrinated into the Disney school.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was really getting big when, I was a kid. All of everyone's like favorite classical animation stories that they loved. Like, I remember seeing most of them, like they would do the circuit and come around in the theaters. And apparently Disney was an appropriate movie choice, even if you were like in a very conservative Christian household. Disney was fine. But it did a lot of indoctrination too. Some of I remembered like I would see like a Disney show, I'd see a movie and think, oh, let me go read the book. And then oh yeah, the rescuers. Oh, this is pretty cool. I like this. It gave me like more avenues to search for things to read. Like if I liked it on the screen, then I'd go find it in the library, and then I'd find the 3 or 4 companion books that went with it. So it opened up a lot of avenues that otherwise I may not have found.
Gargoyles was in fact produced by the Walt Disney Company.
Okay.
So,
I knew John would know. I actually knew
Yeah.
you would know that.
Damn mouse. The mouse is
You're
everywhere.
the right age. And you have the right. You're the John we needed for this.
but that, like, there was a time when that didn't necessarily mean completely sanitized storytelling, and it's not like they were showing like gore and blood on a kids cartoon show, but it was a very, it had a very rich mythology and wonderfully drawn characters. And I don't mean that just in the literal sense. It was a fantastic looking show, but also, I mean, the characters were really compelling. And you had freaking Keith David as the voice of, oh God, it's been too long. Goliath. There you go. And
I've seen a little bit of it.
God, I need to revisit that show because
John, you're how old? 37.
It's like every other show.
Okay.
Phil
38,
Lake, it's on Disney Plus. It's like almost like quite a few of the shows that you mentioned.
John, you're not exactly halfway between me and my daughter's age, but you're close. And I remember her watching that when she was very little.
Yeah,
would have been, you were like 14, maybe. I don't know.
What's great, it was very much akin to the style and tone of Batman the Animated Series. The animation was similar, and it was. I cannot stress how great a time it was to be growing up and watching cartoons on television, because that was the age of and the X-Men and Batman and Gargoyles. And I was thinking about some other shows that I also watched that were on at the time, and like the random one that popped into my head, which is weird because it wasn't very long lasting. It probably wasn't even that great, but they had an animated Conan show. It was called Conan the Adventurer. And
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, and I remember that I watched it, and I remember what I loved about that was that also had like a very mythological, setting for the show and villains and stuff. The films, by comparison, well, I'll reference the first one more than the second one, was more like almost down to earth, even though it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. Not that down to earth, but more so than what they did in the cartoon, which had like snake-like villains and really going for it, and I think that's probably why that appealed to me. Again, like, it had a mythology. I don't remember what the mythology was. It's been too long, but
yeah. Well, Conan is another one of those book series that had like a really, really deep lore. I mean, a lot of it was, not great by today's standards. There was a lot of, stuff in it that you wouldn't want to rehash. But it does have that deep, deep lore that to draw from, to bring you into the world of, Conan the Cimmerian. And it's kind of like the cornerstone of that sword, sandal kind of genre that a lot of other shows are built on.
I will second that guilty. Batman the Animated Series is still the best Batman of all time.
I haven't seen it. I understand it's very, very good.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a pile of, there's a huge pile of shows to watch.
It's pretty much, when they put that out on Blu-ray, and fully remastered, I was like, okay, I don't need anything else Batman wise. They can, like, I'll still watch stuff, but but it doesn't,
you don't need it.
If any future Batman stuff like comes out and it sucks, I don't care. because I've got the crown jewel. But, hi, Obi.
Yeah, just Obi popped in. Hi, Obi. There is. I'm sitting here thinking about the ones that really had me. Like the first one I remember running home for was Star Blazers, but the
Yeah.
one that really got me was Robotech. And this was the early 80s, and I don't know how much you know about the American cartoon show Robotech, but they basically bought a bunch of Japanese animation, redubbed it, and they bought 3 different animated stories, all with changing robots, and they pieced them together to be a generational story. So, like, you can
Good
watch
job, guys.
Robotech Macross Saga with Rick Hunter and, Skull Squadron fighting against the Zentradi. And that's like mini episodes and a huge deep mythology. And then and Max and Miria Sterling are in that. And then you can go watch Robotech Southern Cross, and that's Max and Miria's daughter, Dana Sterling, is the main character of that one. And then you see the aftermath of a intergalactic war when you watch the Invid invasion, and the way it all, which is kind of genius when you think about it's literally just 3 stories about changing robots, but even from different settings. But for the Western audience, they wove a narrative through all of that, and I loved that. I loved Robotech. I have dreamed of the day that they could make a good adaptation of it. It's been mired in like production hell before. It's like who owns the rights to what is a thing that's only recently been legally settled and was held up for 30 odd years due to disputes over who owned what images. And anyway, loved Robotech so much. There is a character in the Invid Invasion. The Invid Invasion is my favorite arc. It's the 3rd arc. It's very good. They have motorcycles that turn into freaking power armor, y'all. And it is amazing. There's a guy called Lancer. He's got 2 big swords, and didn't realize how progressive this was at the time, but he would dress in drag and give concerts as a female vocalist as his cover identity. Mm-hmm. He was a famous woman singer, but when the dress came and the makeup came off, Lancer was a man, and he rode one of these motorcycles, and he had 2 big swords that popped out of his forearms, and it was the coolest thing in the universe at that moment when I first watched this. And I must have been 9, and it changed me forever. It really did, because that was the coolest thing I could ever think of. I still I play a lot of D&D, but I wish I could. The first thing I ever imagined myself that I can really remember was riding that motorcycle and having it turn into power armor around me would have been the coolest thing. Sorry, I went off.
No,
I'm getting the image. You're like going down the road, speeding down the road. The bad guys are up ahead. Pew, 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 pew. You get there, you just stumble, and your armor just wrapping around you. Yeah, cool beat.
Potter's got the right name. They were called Cyclones, the motorcycles. And yeah, that's what I wanted. I wanted a Cyclone so bad.
Real quick, I just want to say I'm so happy to hear this Lady Starfall. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Yeah, it's a beautiful set.
Right.
But yeah, I think we all probably, or at least hopefully most of us had like a show or obsession related that somehow related to transforming robots of some kind. And for me it was definitely Transformers.
I saw before Robotech, but the idea of a person piloting the robot, because like it was a fighter jet that would turn into a robot.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it was just so good. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just, and you want to talk about like moral compasses and sort of mentor figures inside the little box we call television. Optimus Prime was absolutely that for me growing up.
Mhm.
Optimus Prime felt like I obviously I had my, I don't mean this too literally because my dad is wonderful. I didn't need a TV replacement, but Optimus Prime did feel like a father figure, very much. And there's something just about Peter Cullen's voice that was just to the point that even when I saw the really crappy Michael Bay Transformers movie, when it started up and you heard his voice, I was like, oh my God.
Oh, it felt just a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
God, I love Transformers. That was something that, well, my actual brother really, really loved Transformers. And so, as siblings do, on Saturday morning, we had to negotiate what we were going to watch. But Transformers was one of them that I was like, okay, I'd pretend like kind of giving in to him, but I was like, okay, yeah, now the next one's mine too. But yeah, it was. It was something. For a lot of kids, it was something really, really new. You know.
You know what's so? I remember getting my first Transformer. Do you know what? Can you guess what my first Transformer was?
Was it Bumblebee?
Not by a long shot.
Okay.
You got to remember also, Bumblebee was like this big. He was one of the cheap ones,
Mm.
and we didn't have the cheap one.
But he was so cute.
He was cute.
he's got a lot of heart, Steven.
But I want you all to guess who was my first Transformer toy. I'll give you a hint.
Was it
My little
Decepticon?
brother got Optimus Prime, and my older brother got Jazz. We have a winner. There it is.
That was my other
The
like it was
whiny, backstabbing mother. Like, I loved that character.
that was literally my next guess. If it wasn't Bumblebee, it was going to be Starscream, and I'm like, it's one or the other.
I love the Starscream.
He is such a jerkhole. It's annoying, and that voice was just great in my ears. But yes,
The voice also of
so cool.
Cobra Commander from G.I. Joe.
Yes,
and
same guy.
Exactly same voice, and I
Um,
hated both of those characters.
no,
I
like
loved him.
I grew up
loved
loving.
Cobra Commander.
I grew up loving the sound of Cobra Retreat. Oh God.
Oh my god.
Potter's got a great point. Can you imagine releasing a Gen 1 Megatron ever again? No way. Never happened. He was a gun. He was literally a gun.
Well, nice message for the kids. Guns evil.
Which, like,
I always called
That was-
BS
that was
on that
so-
because how does he a tiny gun and then he transforms into this giant robot? No.
well,
No.
and it's because, like, when you transform the actual toy, it was equal in size, but it's like in the actual context of the show, he shrinks down to this
I
gun,
know, and
which another Decepticon has to hold and fire. It's like, what kind of a
Why couldn't he just fire himself? I didn't get it. It's stupid.
All right, are we done crapping on old Transformers?
No, and we only because we love it. It's I absolutely adored. There was
ever a female Transformer. There was.
Yeah,
Not in the first generation.
No, not
But-
the Gen 1.
In second generation, there was one. I can't think of her name.
RC. I think.
RC.
Yeah.
She was like Hot Rod's girlfriend, kind of.
Well,
Like,
because if you're gonna have a girl Transformer, she obviously has to be a love interest.
right. Like we
Steven.
have to define her by her
course she
relationship
does.
to the main character of the Gen 2 story.
And she had to be pink. Like,
Of
let's
course
not
she did.
forget that.
Oh God, was she like a little Mercedes or something too? A little sports car. Ugh.
Um,
Grr.
you know what? Let's
we
do a
could make
mid-roll.
this. We could make this be, a whole stream about Transformers. So let's avoid
Well,
that.
you know what? We're just winding our way through the sci-fi and fantasy that we love now. We've talked
Yeah.
about why we love it, and I'm sure we'll talk some more about why we love it, and some more about what we love specifically. But I love this. I remember liking the Yellow Ranger just because she was in pink, right?
Yes.
You know what? I love pink. One of my favorite colors in all the world, pink. Love it.
Well, actually, before we break, there's something interesting about Transformers and the color pink, which was that when the animated movie originally came out, obviously I don't know what it looked like in theaters, but when it came out on video, the colors were somewhat not necessarily muted, but the colors just turned out in a way so that Hot Rod had like a sort of dark red and orange appearance, which was how a lot of fans just accepted him. When they went back to remaster the film and they went back to the original colors, he actually, instead of the red, it's like a bright pink.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually went with the colors of pink and orange for his design, and of course you had a bunch of toxic men being like, Hot Rod shouldn't be pink. It's like, because why would a Hot Rod have pink colors?
Dude, I want a pink Corvette. Like if I'm in the lottery, that is my indulgence. I'm getting a modern Corvette Stingray and painting that thing bright pink.
Candy apple pink. Lipstick pink. Barbie pink.
Anyway, I digress. Let's do a mid-roll, shall we?
All right.
Oh,
Hi, everybody who's out there watching in YouTube land. Could you please hit the thumbs up button? That's the like. It helps, spread the channel. Could you subscribe if you haven't done that? Most of the people I've seen in the chat today are people I kind of recognize. I assume you're all subscribers. But if you're not, hey, we talk about stuff all the time. Speaking about talking about stuff all the time, we're about to not talk about stuff for a little while, probably. So let's talk about that. John, Nessie, where are you guys going to be for the next few weeks?
I will definitely be here next week. I think I can say that I'll be able to stream the following Sunday as well. I won't be here, but I'll be in Maryland, but I'll still be able to stream.
I don't think you need to if you don't want to.
Well, are you gonna be here on?
I don't know.
On
next
that
week,
day,
next
Nessie?
week's Father's Day, so I just considered we might not do next week at all.
Okay, Nessie, are you available on the 26th? Because that is going to be the Sunday after the finale of Obi-Wan. So, is the
John, I'm going to be it's possible
in Virginia.
Well, I'm not going to be far from home.
That's right.
But we'll see what the Wi-Fi setup is like. Definite maybe, because it's something I wanted to do. So
yeah, because
it'll be more maybe.
Because I'll be at my godmother's house on that day, so like I will have the ability to stream. So yeah, I'll leave that.
So what we're saying is we need to have a meeting.
We've been saying we need to.
Yeah, we're probably going to do it after the stream. But I know that John, you're going to Virginia too, aren't you?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and I know several of the people in the chat, maybe not several, but some of the people in the chat are going to be all in Virginia. I don't get to make it this time. It is what it is. So I just think next week, no, we'll skip. It's Father's Day. Everyone go hug your dad or punch him in the face, depending.
Or ignore them completely.
Or just ignore them completely. But
And as far as like after that, I should also be able to stream on the 3rd.
that's fine. What I'm saying
Okay,
is that
I'm just letting you know the 10th is when I won't be available. That's what I was leading to, because I'll
the
be
10th.
flying home on July 10th.
That's fine.
So
I'll figure out something. So,
okay.
like, Nessie and John's availability is iffy over the next few weeks. If you guys got something you want to talk about, come find me. You know where I live. My contact information is down in the description. You know what else is down there? John's stuff, Nessie's stuff. There's a link to our Patreon down there as well. And those are the awesome people who help us make this without it having to cost us anything. And these wonderful people include our alpha patron, Ridiculous Ed Tollett, Lord John Bronsteen the Wise. Those two comprise the High Council right now. It's just two. They're making everything. They're pulling all the strings.
They're making all the rules.
They are supported by the nobility of the realm, who is Ryan Stavka, the Russian Quartermaster, Reflective Rambling, Arch-Maester Emma, Kate, Mistress of the House of Books, and Jared Kozal, Doctor of Dragons. So, yeah, thanks, patrons. We love you guys. Keep coming. We're going to keep doing this as long as people keep watching. Not sure what we got coming up, but we've talked just things that we've talked about doing. Nessie, we have a conversation about dragons to have. Star Trek, some of the new Star Trek shows are good, and I'm looking forward to talking about those. I'm in love with Ms. Marvel. It's only one episode so far, but it's visually so unique. I'm just in love with it. It was so fun, so refreshing. It's lighthearted and fun. I love that show. We'll be talking about it on this channel, whether you two want to or not. I'll pick a week when y'all are busy and I'll talk about it then. But I loved. It's only one episode, long way from over. But that first episode kind of blew me away with especially with its visual vocabulary. It's really interesting and fun.
Oh yeah, you were talking about that.
Anyway,
I'm going to shock you by saying that I haven't watched it yet.
No, it doesn't surprise me at all. And like, even a lot of Marvel fans are kind of like, I could skip it. But I think it's great.
Yeah, I just got caught up with Kenobi and Strange New Worlds today. And
I'm one behind on Strange New Worlds, but it's good.
Oh, it is so good.
There is so I just finished the sort of like, shall we say, Freaky Friday episode, and I was just like, wow, I had no idea I needed this in my Star Wars or Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek.
And now it's there. I love that episode.
Okay, is there anything else we need to cram into the mid-roll? I think there is. I just remembered. Send me an email. I'll let you into our Slack group. Our Slack group is a non-stop conversation about all the nerdy things we love. It's kind of like a Discord server. We have channels where we talk about Star Wars and Star Trek and D&D and Lord of the Rings and A Song of Ice and Fire, and there's a channel just for memes, and there's a channel for just posting thirsty pics, not of yourself usually, but of your celebrity crushes. That's one of my favorite channels, not gonna lie. A lot of eye candy in there. We're all very respectful, of course. They're human beings after all. But yeah.
Respect for now.
Right.
So far.
Yeah. If you can nerd it, we've got a channel for that, and there will be someone there to talk to you about it.
See, K2 has seen it.
She gets it. She
Sean
gets it.
has seen it, and they're both agreeing. Super fun, visually artistic, and both of those are very apt descriptions. Oh yes, we have a Wordle channel. Don't forget the banana rating channel. Yes, we have that.
Yes.
It's a joke that turned out, yeah.
The thing.
It's a joke that started off from a weird banana at the convention, and now it's just this thing where banana pictures get posted there every once in a while, or banana-themed content. Anyway,
it's one of my
so
favorite
we have
channels.
a lot of fun there. If you want to join, you need to just send me an email at we3dragons@gmail.com. It's on the screen right there. We'll get you in.
Yeah.
Many of the lovely people who are regulars in the chat are members, including Guilty Undertaker and Potter and the Never Never podcast. Hi, Christine.
And
Just in
Jeff.
there. Danny and I post our Wordle scores every day.
Ridiculous Ed.
Yep, that's Sean. He's in there. Reflective Rambling is there. Like a lot of Aaron is a regular. Kate's there all the time. So like this is my okay. I was literally thinking about this the other day.
Taker.
Most of the people you watch on YouTube, you will never have anything more than a meta relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
You will know things about them, and they will mean something to you, but it's not reciprocal. And it's always been part of the idea with this channel to build a circle of friends. If you want in, come on in. No apples allowed.
Yep. Come on in, new friends.
Right.
Meet the rest of our friends.
Okay, great. I've sold our Slack now.
How much should we get for it?
Be nice to yourself, Cassie. That's my friend you're talking about. But yeah, okay, that was a long mid-roll. Not anyway. Talk about sci-fi and fantasy. John, go. Nessie, go.
Okay, so comics was like a big thing.
Sorry.
So comic books. That's
comic
a big
books.
thing. That's like a genre all to itself. It kind of blends a lot of the mediums that we love. It's storytelling, it's artistic, it's science fiction, it's fantasy, it's horror, it's a lot of things. And it's, guess what? You can stick it before the days of the internet. You could stick it in your backpack and you could read it behind your book at school when you were supposed to be reading government. You could catch up on the latest goings on with, the Justice League, or, Red Sonja, or even, Howard the Duck. Yeah.
Well, the really funny thing, considering how much I was into X-Men as a kid, I was not a great reader of comics. But I was at the comic book shop with my friends quite a bit, and I did own a number of comics, but it was mostly because of the artwork and the fact that during that time of the early 90s, when the animated series was out, the X-Men comics were, it wasn't most of the time, because I think he did it for a stretch of a couple of years, but it was Jim Lee's art in the X-Men comics, and then the artist that came after him kind of carried on that style. So it was like all those character designs and style that were in the animated series originated from his work in the comics. So I remember buying a lot of X-Men comics because the covers that were really cool looking and were very stylish. So there was a time when I had like a big box full of comics, and then at some point I got rid of them. I'm regretting that now because I wish I had those, but I'm making up for it. But
Yes, you
but
are.
but now I've come full circle now because Kelly has gotten me into collecting the comics, and I've bought a lot of them. But so yeah, but I would say when I was growing up, like the actual content of the comics was not something that I was super into, but I was really into adaptations that came from comics.
Yeah. It was just a portable shot of dopamine that you could just have with you just about anywhere. At road trips, it was like a really big thing for us. We would, before we were gonna, take off on a road trip, we would stop by the comic book store, which was actually the comic book store slash bookstore slash card store slash whatever. But it had that was our choices, and just perusing that spinning that display of all of the new comics, and just getting to pick like several at that time, like, oh, this one, and oh, this one, oh, they've got a new Silver Surfer out, oh yeah, I gotta take that one with me. Oh, Galactus is in this one, great. But it was one of those things, like, yes, you could follow a story, but you could also just pick it up. It was easily digestible. You could just pick it up, open the pages, look at the first off, sometimes really great cover artwork. Sometimes you're like, that was a miss, but go on in and dive right in. It was just so easily accessible, you know, without you could make a long-term commitment, or you could just dive in, stick your toe in, and enjoy an episode. You know, it was so accessible.
Some of my favorite stories that I watch now come from comic books. I was just gushing about Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan.
Hmm.
I love the MCU. John, I know you love the X-Men films. But there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that love Batman and Superman. I'm like, there's a reason for that. I think they fall into the same. I think they fall into this genre.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of hero stories,
Well, I mean,
but with the
especially
modern trappings and in a world where we're imagining how it could be different, how it could be better or worse, based on these unique hero stories.
and yeah, and I've always said, like, especially you just mentioned my love of the X-Men films. The first couple, especially the first X-Men film, I felt it always felt much more science fiction than anything, because it had like this quasi futuristic setting where everything was super sleek
Hmm.
and like the costumes and all that stuff, and I think that's part of what I liked so much. It was during those couple of years, and like we're in like the late 90s and early 2000s, where they were trying to make everything look kind of futuristic and cool. Like you had the Matrix, and then X-Men had some of that look as well, and black leather was a big thing. Uh,
Apparently, yeah,
but
jumpsuits.
yeah, no, but yeah, so a lot of my love of stories did originate from comic books, even if I wasn't a big comic book fan at the time. But so like X-Men and again like Batman, Spider-Man, you know, I loved very much. And um but yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm moving further along in the timeline of my growing up, because now I went through sort of phases of different like fantasy type stories. I remember in the late 90s, a big thing for me I've talked about in the past was Highlander, which were
Hmm.
about these immortals who lived, for ages. And
Mhm.
and had duels to the death with swords and stuff. That was very fantasy, and the mythology of that was great because you had all these backstories that went back hundreds, some even thousands of years about what these people had gone through, and so that satisfied my love of fantasy, some science
Fantasy.
fiction, and also historical drama because you got to
Yeah,
go
it
back to
was
all these. Yeah, I mean it's
quick date for you, John.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, guilty over here because it was kind of like a love story too. So you get a
Yeah,
little bit of that romanticism involved in it, and Conor
and
McGregor
this
was not hard on the eyes, I will say. So
and
I like.
especially on the in particular on the television show, you had the character of Duncan MacLeod, who had a very strong moral compass. So going back to what I was talking about characters that I look up to, and he was very much one of those. But then you also had the cast of characters. One of them, his name was Mythos, who was one of the longest living immortals, but he was a wisecracker. So he was sort of like, the humorous one, but who had a dark past. And this was all stuff that I could really sink my teeth into. And then after that, it's great because I always feel like that's when I start going through, like, I can see a linear progression of things that I was into. Because after that, on like, as far as like, somewhere in there, Lord of the Rings came in, but on the television side, that was when I started getting into Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, and then a couple of years after that, Battlestar Galactica and
Mm.
Lost, which is, we can classify Lost as science fiction, and I think, and then eventually leading to Game of Thrones. But I saw you get excited when I mentioned Buffy and Angel, Stephen. Like
One of my
that was
shows, man.
that was huge for me.
Let's
Yeah,
pull Charmed into the trifecta there because even
So
though it wasn't.
my mom and my sister were Buffy fans really from the get go, and I was not. You know, I'd heard of the show, came over a time or two. I didn't live at home, you know, anymore, but I would. I was over one night and they were watching an episode, and it was the first ever Halloween episode, the one where they become their costumes, and Allison Hannigan dressed up as we'll just say a lady of the night, and then she put a ghost outfit on, so she became like a ghost of an escort, and I think I came in at the end of the episode, and she right when she walks across in front of Oz, and I'm like, whoa, who is that? And then Oz is like, who is that girl? And because Allison Hannigan, redhead, nerdy, like she got it all as far as I'm concerned at that point. But yeah, I eventually started watching the show, and it's great, man. It's great, and it is fantasy show, not really a horror show.
hmm
Yeah, I didn't fall into the Buffy genre like you did. Um, Weirdly, because I got that whole vampire thing. I like don't get me started on that. But like another show that came on about the same time was as I mentioned, Charmed, and it had that it's kind of like urban fantasy. It's set in our time, modern time, but it's got that uh, fantasy background, angels and demons, and um, where everything is part of it, and witches, of course, and the power of three. Um, so that appealed to me just a bit more. Though I did kind of tagged on to Angel a bit because I mean David Boreanaz, who's gonna knock me for that. But yeah, it was kind of like if there was a CW version of shows, we were watching them at that time. I don't know if the CW was a thing, but it's kind of like the thing that they like to put out.
I don't know. Buffy was just a different
really good.
critter.
Yeah, well, a lot of it comes down to right.
It was funny because I think I got into Buffy because it was after Highlander had gone off the air, and I was looking for another type of fantasy show, and obviously I knew of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so I gave it a shot. And of course, you guys know that a lot of my watching of things growing up was connected with, spending time with my mom. But she was not like digging the overall vibe of Buffy, but she had gotten into watching Angel, though, because that was a little bit more of a grown-up show. But it was funny because she ended up coming back around to Buffy after the final season of Angel because Spike went over to that show. And she was like, okay, I want to see what his story has been. So I got her to go back and watch it. And then, of course, she got to see his whole character arc leading up to the moment where he appears in Angel. And she's like, I had no idea all that stuff was going on.
Fun fact, by the way. I've been considering getting an intro video rather than just a 30-second countdown, getting a 30-second intro made, and I thought about getting James Marsters to do it through Cameo.
Nice. I got to just recently meet him at MegaCon here in Florida.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he was so nice.
Yeah, you've got his number then. We'll hit him up.
He and I are tight now.
Yeah, share your mutuals, right, on Twitter.
But no, he was so nice because I told him, I basically, in the 60 seconds I got to chat with him, I told him about my mom and the fact that we watched stuff together and that she was the one who started on Angel and how we watched the shows together. And he was so sweet. He was like, be sure to tell your mom that she has excellent taste in shows. I was like, I will. And so that was nice. That was a long time coming for me because I've wanted to meet him for some time.
Yeah, it would be cool. I love that character.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of interviews with James Marsters, and he's just such a classy guy.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and my love of his character goes back to, what I talked about before, how at an early age I was loving complicated characters, and Spike is the ultimate complicated character because he starts to, not to say like, there's dark places he goes, that his character goes, but early on, even before he gets his soul back, there's part of him that's getting back in touch with his humanity, which, is so...
That is a whole conversation to have, man. Because I'm not actually sure I agree with that. I think that he is always a soulless, selfish, ego-driven creature until the moment he gets his soul back.
Well, two of those words would still describe human beings, but...
Yeah. Anyway, I think you understand what I mean. Like,
yeah, I know.
So you're saying without a soul, basically, we're all just sociopaths, and walking.
I didn't want to get into the debate because that's the debate about Spike's character can get messy. The point was that he was a very complicated character and fascinating to watch over the course of both shows.
I'll give you that one. Like I think Spike loves things and people. I think he loves Drusilla. I think he loves Buffy at the end, but he only understands love as a sort of a possessive thing until he gets his soul back. Yeah.
Oh, and just quick shout out to that scene in the church, though, when he drapes himself
Drapes
over the
himself on the
cross.
cross.
Oh my god!
Mwah. Beautiful. Anyway,
So
go
good.
watch. What we're saying is go watch Buffy. Part of the reason I love that though is that like why do we love sci-fi and fantasy? Good villains, heroes who struggle and fail
Mm-hmm.
and continue to push and have triumphs and fall down again and
Yeah.
have things taken away from them and learn to live with guilt and loss. Like it's one of those things. Star Trek, the original Star Trek could never do this. You know, you could watch Elizabeth Taylor die in front of you, and literally 7 days later, you have to be like it never happened. Because the next episode, and there was no long-term narrative. Buffy was one of the first
That's why I'm still gonna slam down and say Deep Space Nine, Steven. Deep Space Nine.
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
But Buffy did that very well.
Yeah.
Like when the first evil says, "You know what? I'm gonna be back," and 6 seasons later, it actually shows up. Maybe it's 5 seasons. I can't remember exactly, but like that's some patient storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the long form storytelling is also it's really very appealing to me too. Like I watched 4 iterations of the Vampire Diaries because it was like a generational thing. So you could watch the original, then you could watch the originals, and then you could watch the God, what was the crap? I can't remember it right now. But yeah, long form storytelling. These characters go through like highs and lows, like you say, things taken away from them. They immortal creatures who live forever, and like they have deep, deep-seated pasts with each other. Such a yeah, it's complicated, and that's what I like about it. You know, if you can say it's complicated, the relationships and how it's carried over into the storytelling seamlessly, like it's just part of the tale. And that's some good storytelling.
I will say
There, and thank you.
on the subject of like long form storytelling and narratives, I remember being like, and of course Buffy was doing this, but also you would still have like interspersed between like big story episodes, would be like monster of the week episodes, so that it could still fit into that traditional narrative. I remember when, first of all, a major change was when Angel switched over to widescreen cinematography in season 3, I think. And like they started in season 3 and then they went heavy into it in season 4, was true serialized storytelling, where like every episode was just like a continuing story, where it was just like, all right, we're taking a break and we're back. And I just remember being so fascinated that, and I feel like that was around the time when that was being experimented with, and eventually it led our way to sort of the modern storytelling we get with stuff now, where that's taken for granted, but it was not, it was not a normal thing back then. And
can I share something that another friend of mine shared with me?
Mm-hmm.
So one of my very few IRL friends that I engage with, this guy named Patrick. He's a patron. His name's in there. By process of elimination, you could probably figure out who he is. He's a good dude. But he sent me a message earlier today. He said, after seeing the title of your show today, you need to read Token's essay on fairy stories.
I love
put it into context. He's going for his literature PhD. He's a few years older than me, so 50, I'm going to guess. 49 or 50. And he's trying to, finally get a PhD in literature, and good for him. He said, it's not the easiest of reads. It took me forever to read the 20-page thing. But you wouldn't have any problem with its concept. It is a lot boring.
It is not.
But addresses the topic of why we like them, fantasy stories, and why they are necessary to modern life. So, if anybody wants a reading recommendation, it's not that stellar, go ahead. But he said, what you do on YouTube and what I do at school is actually very similar. The level of analysis is also comparable. In academia, they just hold their noses in the air and pretend you don't enjoy and pretend not to enjoy the stuff. When where you revel in enjoying it, I can say that I honestly prefer the company of movie/book fans over the learned academics any day. Yeah, so what we're doing has value. And again, I've had conversations with him because I think his dissertation is going to be on how George R.R. Martin is overrated or something like that. It's an academic paper. You want to stir the pot, I guess.
Oh yeah.
We don't agree on everything, but he's a good guy, and that was a really nice message. But it also captured like what we do here is academic on some level. Like, we're not stupid. We that's why I love these conversations, because it makes me feel like I'm learning something. Even just to hear either one of you have a different, not even a different point of view, but a different lens on why do we love this? Because we've talked about 15 different reasons to love science fiction and fantasy. Like, it lets us imagine who we wish we were, who we fear we might become. If faced with this moral quandary, what would I do? Oh, that's what that character did. I like that character. Oh, that character does the opposite of everything I do. I kind of like that character too. Sometimes we root for the bad guy. There's a fun to it, but to me, it's something. We are meant to be savannah-dwelling hunter-gatherers, if you want to, or basic tool users, probably. We did not, I don't think humans invented tool use, but like Homo erectus and stuff, you know what I mean? So, but we are meant to be savannah-dwelling persistence hunters and hunter-gatherers.
Obligate by
when you live the modern lifestyle, that is not what your brain is actually built for. There's a lot of time where you would be thinking about hunting or gathering, where you're not hunting or gathering. And even back then, though, the stories of the ancestors, like these fantasy stories, sci-fi is a fairly modern thing. A lot of people point to Frankenstein as the first ever sci-fi novel. I'm not in a position to disagree with that. But fantasy stories, like the oldest story we have is fantasy stories, the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Mahabharata from India, and
that is the first science fiction story. I'm just gonna say.
maybe, and but like Journey to the West from China, like all of the oldest stories are these sort of heroic adventures with magic and fantastical creatures, and it's meant to tell us, and each one of them tells us something about the society that made it, and that's a thing that continues to be true to this day.
Which I always find hilarious, that fantasy is a genre, the so-called experts, thumb their nose at it. It's like that's where, the oldest stories are fantasy stories, and I just, it's so utterly ridiculous. I do want to say, as a side note, though, I'm going to disagree that On Fairy Stories is a dry read. I have read it several times. I love that piece by Tolkien.
I'm not surprised that some of you and Dan particularly have read it. Yeah. Not surprised at all.
Not surprised at all.
You two are like the ones I think of when I think Lord of the Rings. Also, wouldn't be that surprised to learn that Aaron had read it. Helen's read it, I'm sure.
Kelly's probably got a copy.
Yeah, on her TBR.
And and Tolkien goes into a lot of really interesting stuff in that dealing with, he calls basically the world of the imagination, if you will. When you read a story, he calls that the secondary world. The world we exist in is the primary world. And if you think of reading or writing, as the art of creation, it's like we're actually creating every time we read, words from a book, and that's always really stuck with me, and I find it so intriguing, and it's why, like, if you just think about that in the way that when every person who reads something has their own unique world that they create out of, because it's not just the words the author writes the words on the page, but then it's also up to the reader to create the world as they see it, and that is so fascinating to me, the idea that you're going to get something incredibly unique, and the idea that you're creating a world inside your mind. And that's why I love these stories so much. I mean, that you can say that's true of any type of, story that you might read, but it's especially true with fantasy stories because it's a world that doesn't exist. And so your imagination has to really work over time. Whereas if it's something that's set in the real world, you have sort of reference points that you can draw from. But I think with fantasy stories, you're really pulling and creating that much more. But I just love that, and that's why I said before, I love when you place a really big book in front of you, because I know that that's going to require a lot of investment from me, and to say that for the foreseeable future I'm going to enter the world that's inside these pages, and I'm not going to have to leave for a good long while, and I can get invested in that. Mm-hmm. And it's just, what do you think, Steve?
I would just like to add everything he just said, but D&D.
Yeah,
but with D&D, the added layer of like the fact that I'm participatory in the telling of the story, but I'm not in control of every aspect of it. Even as a dungeon master, you're not in control of every aspect of it. As a player, you're certainly not. But you do have some agency in. It's like reading a book where you get to have some agency in what the characters actually do. And even if you're the dungeon master, like, you can create situations, but what the players choose to do in that situation is, and it lets you see what other people think of the story that you put together. Like, it's unique experience. It fits because it's a fantasy adventure story. It's a fantasy adventure game. That's what it's about. It's always been probably my number one creative outlet. I mean, I've been in a band before, and I've painted and made cosplay, but like, my artistic expression is being a dungeon master, y'all. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, collaborative storytelling.
Yeah, because honestly, this is all about the stories we tell each other, and D&D is just the stories we tell each other together.
I think it probably has a lot to do with my sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, predisposition towards solitude, and the fact that I get.
You're a bit of a hermit. I got you.
Yeah. And so I just have memories of, like, I would be in high school, and I'm thinking back to when I was reading Lord of the Rings, actually. And, it would be gym period, and you'd have the stuff that you kind of had to do as part of gym class, but then they'd give you, like, half the class period to, basically do whatever you wanted on the gym floor, or you could sit on the bleachers and do school stuff or whatever. I'd pull out my book bury my head in that, and everything else outside would just disappear, and I would enter the world of the story.
That didn't happen to me often, but it happened with A Song of Ice and Fire. It also happened a lot with Crichton. For me, Michael Crichton got me a bunch, especially in my high school days when sort of like there was the height of turning his books into films. I read The Sphere, I read Jurassic Park, I read Lost World, I read The Andromeda Strain and Congo, and gosh, I can't even remember them all.
Timeline, yeah.
Timeline,
Yes.
yeah. I never did see the Timeline movie. That was sort of at the tail end of converting his books to films.
The book was the movie was crap.
Yeah,
The book
what I
was
hear.
really good. That I really identified with that one a lot because I'm like,
And the thing, he was a thriller writer, but he was a sci-fi thriller writer. Like he got his science correct, at least to the best of science's understanding of whatever topic he was writing on. Like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park are as close as he could get them with the cutting edge scientific knowledge of the time when he wrote the book.
Right.
Now, when the film was made, the idea of them having feathers was pretty well around, but CGIing feathers is not easy, so let's make them scaly. But yeah, I loved Michael Crichton. Loved Michael Crichton in high school.
Something that I left out from my early years, and I can't believe it because we actually have talked about this, Nessie, over on your channel, was a big fantasy story growing up was Disney's The Sword and the Stone.
Yeah.
And so King Arthur stories have
Disney
always...
indoctrination there, John.
But it was great. It's still my favorite King Arthur movie. It really is.
It's good one. It's good.
It made it really accessible, to a young reader. I mean, let's face it,
And we have into the fantasy elements too.
Yeah.
That Merlin was a great version of Merlin.
It was a great Merlin, with his little glasses down like that, and
Higatus Bigatus Mum Prestidigitonium.
Which I'd wager to say that when I first read The Hobbit, my image of Gandalf probably was not that far from, the Merlin of Sword in the Stone.
It's like whichever one you saw first, it kind of imprinted on your brain.
Yeah.
This is, when you're looking, this is how it's supposed to look like. So when you, read some of those, read or see some things later, or read an interpretation of it, it's, kind of sticks in your brain. Yeah, that's how you kind of visualize it. It's kind of like a broad strokes that colors your imagination.
Speaking of visual inspirations for reading Tolkien, I also remember that when I went back years later to revisit Sleeping Beauty, I was watching the stuff down in what's the sorceress called? Maleficent. Her underground dungeons and stuff, and there's this pale sickly green color and stuff, and I realized that subconsciously I had held on to the memory of that, and that influenced how I saw Mordor and Minas Morgul when I was reading that part of those books. So it's really funny how these things from childhood stick with you.
Yep, same.
You know what? We're all dreamers too. The three of us are. I would wager pretty much everybody in the chat is as well. I have this notion that we and you dream about something better. Dream about a better version of ourselves. Dream about a better version of the world we live in. Dream about a better future for the generation that comes after us. And fantasy and sci-fi stories are how we examine what that looks like, what steps we need to take to get there, what challenges we need to overcome before it can happen. And I think, Mom didn't do this, Dad did, but like all my sci-fi fantasy obsessions were a waste of time. But man, they've made me the open-minded, thoughtful, caring, considerate person that I am. So, yeah,
Yeah.
screw you, Dad.
Yeah, it's not a waste of time, you know. Um, it I lost my train. It made us who we are today.
Hmm.
It opened our mind to better possibilities, and you could maybe condense it into a four-letter word and say hope. It instilled a little bit of hope inside of each and every one of us that things might not be great now, but we have hope that with
But you can strive and overcome like your greatest
striving.
heroes for that imagined future of your favorite sci-fi classic. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Samwise Gamgee has stuck with me through my life ever
Good-
since I first
good
encountered
choice.
him. Of that wonderful speech at the end of Two Towers that has its roots in the book, but it's obviously a bit different for the film. But it's a speech about holding on to hope and
Mhm.
that a new
Look,
day will
find
come
out all the
and
clearer. Like,
yeah.
yeah, great speech, great monologue.
Yeah.
It's something that it's the reason why stuff like that is part of the reason why I will always go back to that story. It's striving for hope, when things seem at their darkest, and I think that a lot of people can relate to feeling that way at many points, in the real world, and so it's something that I think we all need to hold on to sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but and I know we're winding down, and then there were a couple things I wanted
You get them out now.
to say about the subject. Going back to what I was saying earlier about the, escapism, and that's a big part of what's so appealing to it. There's that wonderful quote from A Song of Ice and Fire, about um, a reader lives 1,000 lives, and
Mm.
the person who never reads lives only one. And that's what, and it's not just reading, it's, film and television and all forms of storytelling. I feel like, I like getting to immerse myself in a world that is not my own, and to feel like I've gone on a journey. And and the more of that I get to do, the better, because not only for you know the sense of escapism, but it does allow you to come back around and view what you're going through with fresh eyes.
And maybe what someone else is going through too. Like I've
Yeah,
learned so much empathy from these type of stories
yeah.
by seeing someone else's life and struggle. What about you, Nessie? Any final thoughts?
Just keep hope alive, guys. Keep science fiction, fantasy. Keep watching. Keep dreaming. Keep hoping, and maybe one day we can have a little bit better tomorrow. So
Yeah.
keep hope alive.
So yeah, watch your fantasy, watch your sci-fi. Don't let anybody tell you what's good or not. I mean, I
Carry it
might
to
tell you
the
what's
next
good or not,
generation.
but like love what you love. Let it speak to you. Let it inform who you are. Let it inform what you want to see in the world. Draw strength from those heroes that stand up and do what's right.
Mhm.
You know, when next time you're in a situation where like I'm not, I know what's the right thing to do, but I'm scared to do it. Well, man, channel your Samwise Gamgees and your Luke Skywalkers, and that's one of
Mhm.
the things that's so important about this type of storytelling. So yeah, that's all I've got to say. I think I've had about all I can talk about. No, that's not true. I can't think of anything else I need to say at the moment. How about you, John? How about you, Nessie?
Just that I'm actually surprised that we stayed rooted so much in stuff from our younger years, and we didn't touch much on things like. I guess we touched on Star Wars a little bit, but not as much as I would have thought. And of course, I don't think we touched the Song of Ice and Fire at all.
I was already super nerd by then.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that we're just feeding
Like,
our.
sorry, George, you didn't convert me. I was already here.
Yeah, I was already here. I was in line already. You didn't have to. You didn't have to invite me over. I was there already.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, there's so much in fantasy and sci-fi that I love, and this I feel like was just the tip of the iceberg with some of that stuff, but yeah, no,
Nobody ever even mentioned Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I know.
Avatar: The Last Airbender, great fantasy storytelling and world building.
And I think we got one mention of the Expanse.
Yeah, at least. Yeah. What about you, Nessie? Any final thoughts? No? I mean, you don't have to, obviously.
No, we've all said it. We've said it enough, but yeah, just love what you love. Live, and hey, screw everybody else.
Yeah, and never, hopping on the back of what Stephen said before, don't ever let anybody tell you something silly or a waste of time, because one day you're going to find an enormously awesome big group of friends who share that passion with you, as we all have been fortunate, enough to have. And yeah, exactly, Aaron.
Yep.
All right, friends. Well, I think that's it then. We won't be back next week because it's Father's Day. I hope that all of you who have good relationships with your fathers will enjoy your Father's Day with them. I'm probably gonna see my own kids. Yeah, so it's a lot easier if I don't have to plan around streaming at 5:00 in the afternoon, my time. So yeah, thanks for joining us though, because this was a great conversation, y'all. And
yeah,
you guys in the chat, y'all were popping off today. It was a fantastic time. Really enjoyed it. We really ought to do more like this more often, where we just pick a broader topic and pontificate.
Yeah, no,
really broad topic. Why do we love sci-fi and fantasy? It's pretty big.
It was wonderful to talk about, and also didn't require the preparation.
No. Mom said something like that to me earlier. She's like, "You don't have to do any homework for this," and I was on Zoom talking to somebody. Might have been like Kate or Jess. Anyway, somebody said to me, you don't have to do homework. And I'm like, nah, man, I've been doing my homework for this stream for 40 years.
Whole life.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, so come back 2 weeks from now. We'll have something. Ms. Marvel will be talked about soon. Some Star Trek is coming. Got a couple of things in the pipeline for I Know That Nerd. Nessie and I have a dragon conversation coming up. I'm sure we'll pick a movie. John, you had a whole list of movies that were turning 20 years old this year.
Mm-hmm.
So
which was just depressing to look at, but
we got stuff. But this topic came from our own lovable Irish troll Potter Ruan. Potter, thanks for the idea, man, because he just discussed us talking. He said, "Why not talk about this?" And we were all like, "Actually, that sounds like a lot of fun." So, if you've got an idea for something you'd like to see us talk about, hit me up. Again, contact information down below.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. We'll be back in 2 weeks. peace and be excellent to each other. Good night, y'all.